The people making Monaco take the mic. I'm Nancy Heslin, and welcome to Monaco Info, the podcast. Our guest today was on the starting grid of 246 Formula One Grand Prix races. He celebrated 13 victories and was the 2001 World Drivers' Championship runner-up. The Scottish pundit has remained planted in the world of motorsport as a correspondent with the BBC and now Channel 4. He owns a pub, a television production company, and has written 2 books. And in 2024, he launched More Than Equal, a program that looks to break down the barriers that have held back female talent in motorsport for the past 50 years. Welcome, David D.C. Coulthard.
What an intro.
Took me some time to get all that information together, David. But
Condensed, yeah.
Thank you so much for coming into Monaco Info, the podcast in English. It's great to see you. I don't think we're having a dance party today because you've got something going on with your shoulder.
Yeah, I'm a little bit broken. I was on an epic motorbike tour of New Zealand. I'd never been to New Zealand before, but conveniently, my old teammate Mark Webber, also a Monaco resident, organised for us to head down there the Monday after the first Grand Prix. And then on the Thursday, we'd stopped for a little refreshment break. The news came through that sadly we'd lost Eddie Jordan, my partner in crime with FFS podcast, another Monaco resident. And then, I was kind of not focused anymore. Head wasn't really in the ride, and I managed to fall off and break my collarbone. So I've bravely battled through going to Shanghai and did the Grand Prix, and then came back via London where they decided there was too much fragmentation. So I've now got 8 screws in my left collarbone.
Thanks to Eddie.
Thanks to Eddie. Now, either he was looking out for me and he saved me breaking my neck, or he was just giving me a little push from beyond the...
It's hard to know which one that is, right?
Yeah, exactly. He was a prankster, and he loved winding me up. But anyway, I will forever remember the day that Eddie passed.
Well, I really wanted to say I'm sorry for the loss of your friend. You guys have been friends a long time, and you ran this amazing podcast together, Formula for Success. And, Eddie was a Formula One legend, but just a huge presence here in Monaco. So maybe for listeners, you can just say how you guys met, because he was a little bit older of your generation, but also maybe share some stories for those that don't know how colorful Eddie Jordan was.
Yeah, Eddie was 22 years older, but in actual fact, sometimes when you're with Eddie, you felt like you were having, a teenager with you. He'd so much energy, so much passion for life. He'd started out, he's Irish, born near Dublin, started out in the banking industry, but got a passion for racing and became a race driver. Realised that probably he didn't have the talent to rise to the very top, and then got into running his own team driver management, created Jordan Grand Prix, who went on to win a few Grand Prix, which is no mean feat against the big manufacturers of Ferrari and Mercedes and Renault and the likes. He was just a crazy, wonderful Irishman. Anyone who's come across the Irish know they have a passion for life, the gift of the gab. EJ had been there and done it, and therefore he could call out a Toto Wolff or a Christian Horner or a Fred Vasseur.
And he did.
And he did very often. And they took it because they knew he'd been there and done that, and they had respect for his achievements, an entrepreneurial racer. And sadly, he was a little bit slow to get his prostate checked. The cancer had spread, and by the time he was into the treatment, it was into the bone. So in the end, his passing came quite quickly. But of course, we're left with some amazing memories, some wonderful stories. Anyone who's in Monaco that's met him you probably hear him before you see him.
Exactly.
Loved his music. Love to, just generally be life and soul of any event. So it's not going to be the same without Eddie. He was an amazing individual, and he leaves behind, his wife and kids, grown-up kids, and a whole bunch of great memories. So he moved the dial.
So you did the Formula for Success on YouTube with him, and you just were mentioning before the show that you did 100 episodes together. What was the show?
It was Eddie's show. He loved motor racing. He loved calling people out within motor racing. He loved the fact that the podcast, we could bring on guests that he knew from the music industry and sports world. He wasn't just sort of Formula One. So the podcast was Eddie. It was Eddie's ramblings, and I was just there really to top and tail it and give it a little bit of structure. So I don't believe we will continue the podcast because I just can't imagine who I would do it with. It was always enlightening to spend time with EJ. We didn't do as many of them face to face as I would have liked because of the travelling nature of both our lives. He spends the winter down in South Africa and the summer here in Monaco, and then Grand Prix see me on the road quite a lot. So anyway, we fitted it in as best we could. But it was just obviously the podcast FFS will remain there, and for anyone who's not listened to it, then check it out and you'll understand. It's the discussion between two middle-aged men and the sort of the shared passion that we have for motorsport and life in general.
But one of the things I find amazing about you is how do you find the time? Like, you are traveling for the whole F1 calendar, right, to report live. So you're in 24 circuits. There's 21 countries, 5 continents. You were just in Australia and China. You're going to Japan. How do you find the time to do all these projects? Because you got your hands in a lot of pots.
Yeah, I guess I've been used to my whole life travelling. Growing up in Scotland in karting, I had to go down south to England to find the competition, to enter the British Championships, to find success, and then, get on the ladder towards car racing. So packing a bag and being on the move and working whilst on the move is something that I've only ever known. I've never really had, although I have an office here in Monaco, and Viola, my long-suffering PA, runs my life out of the office. But I'm not there that much, of course, because although I'm in Monaco for a week now, which is fantastic, a lot of the time, as you identify, on this travelling world, travelling circus of Formula One, we're on the move. So I didn't come back between Australia and China. I mentioned I went to New Zealand for a few days because there were back-to-back races. It just didn't make sense to come all the way back for 2 days. But I do love when I come back, which is, I think, part of the appreciation I have for Monaco. I've been here since '95. And a lot of people don't get it. Usually, the ones that have only ever visited once, or they just don't really understand what this wonderful place offers us all. But I love it. I feel good here.
So, if you look at your life here, is this what your life was like growing up as a kid in Scotland?
See, I liken Monaco to a large village, and I grew up in a small village in Scotland. There was 300 people in the village I grew up. Our family business is Transport, a truck company that was founded in 1916. My brother runs that business today, and his 3 grown-up kids work in the business. So, it's been there for well over 100 years, and generationally, it's served the family well. So I guess logistics, I always understood about travel. My parents, obviously during the period I was growing up, they were always away on business, and then on weekends we'd go away racing together. So Monaco feels safe and secure, like I felt in the village. It feels like a big village in as much that, we can move around quite easily, and the security that we're afforded here is the thing that just makes me feel happy and safe.
What was it that really got you into karting then? Because you started karting at age 11?
Yeah. So 11 was the earliest you could start back in those days. Nowadays, you can start at 8 years old racing.
Right. I thought maybe you were old starting at 11,
yeah,
but that was the time.
That was the time, yeah. My father had been Scottish karting champion when he was 14, and it coincided with his father dying. So he got packed off to boarding school and his racing stopped. But at 14, he had established, he had a skill, and he loved racing. And then when he finished his boarding school and was given the keys to the family company, then he had to work on the business. So he had a passion for racing. He would go to Le Mans, he would go to Formula One races, but he couldn't race anymore. And then he would sponsor some guys locally in karting. And then I'm the middle of 3. My older brother, myself and my younger sister, we were all given little motorbikes and karts when we were younger, again, countryside stuff. So there's a freedom that comes with that. And I was the one, along with my sister, who wanted to race. So I got a kart for my 11th birthday, and 2 weeks later I did my first race. Got lapped by everybody because obviously, back then you didn't sort of test, you just went racing. And then over the years, of course, you get better. And then, I Scottish champion, and then I became British champion. And then my father created the opportunity to go into Formula Ford. I was perfectly happy in karts. I never really considered that racing could be a career. I thought I'd work in the family transport business.
Really?
Yeah, I never thought I'd drive a truck, but I thought I'd be in the office and deal with the clients and stuff. So I went, when I left school at 17, I went to a local college to do business computing because I thought that would stand me in good stead for being in the transport office. But in that first year of car racing, I won 22 out of 32 races and got the call from Jackie Stewart to come and join his son's team called Paul Stewart Racing, and the hobby became a career. Do
you remember any time of karting, but really like the first time that you did a race, like as a kid, that feeling?
I remember being pretty timid. I was a shy kid.
Really?
Yeah. I was never sort of, boisterous and sort of jumping over high walls.
You were no Eddie Jordan as a kid.
No. I was very, even when I got into Formula One, I was still quite quiet. I was still quite shy. I was more sort of in my thoughts. It took me a long time to sort of find myself. And I say that actually where I felt I fitted in was probably when I was in my late 20s. That was a point where I was an established Grand Prix driver. I'd won Grand Prix. I was living here. I had public recognition, which was never something that I aspired to. And in the beginning, I was always a little bit uncomfortable. What do people expect me to be? And then the penny dropped later, as I say, in my late 20s, where whatever they expect me to be, this is me. And you just get comfortable with who you are. But I think that was the sort of shy village boy thing. People from down south, people in London, or people, living in Monaco, they seem sophisticated and tanned.
They seem.
Yeah, exactly. They just seem so worldly. And I wasn't particularly worldly, but I am now because I've been around the world many, many times now.
I mean, I do want to ask you about getting into Formula One, but just as you're talking about being shy, if you think about the way that young drivers are now with social media, like they're just plastered all over the place. For you, was it strange to all of a sudden be this public persona and people coming up to you? And I'm sure people still come up to you. Do you enjoy that? Or do you really try to keep your life private?
I didn't try anything other than just to live my life. So when you reference, trying to keep your life private, it makes me think of, one of my former competitors, one of the most successful guys in the history of the sport, Michael Schumacher. He had a very clear boundary between Michael the racer and Michael and his family, and arguably he needed to create that boundary because he had a higher level of success earlier in his life than I had. But I just lived. I was never really... of course, I'm aware of the fact that anyone who follows Formula One, and I still work in Formula One today with television, then they might recognise this square face and the grey hair that goes with it. But I have no problem equally that if I'm just another face in the crowd, I don't seek recognition. My old buddy Eddie Jordan loved recognition. He loved creating a bit of a noise if he entered the room, and he even if people didn't know who he was, you could tell that he was somebody, that he was doing something of note, because he loved being centre of attention. So I've grown into my life. I've grown into the recognition, and I'm definitely not what I'd call shy now. I'm very happy to, I've had plenty of parties over the years for people to know that I'm, not the shy and retiring type today. But
does that mean when you went from being in the cockpit to going onto TV, let's say, was that difficult for you because now you're presenting and it's your face and your voice, where you're not hiding the car and it's your talent that way? Was it difficult?
It's certainly different.
Because it's a skill as well.
Yeah, it's certainly a lot different than being interviewed. You would imagine, because I was 15 years as a Grand Prix driver, so I did lots of interviews with lots of different nationalities of TV stations and the likes, but you're talking about your specialist subject, which is you. So
no wrong answer.
yeah, exactly. You can answer whatever you want. Doing a professional job in television where you're creating insight and sharing your knowledge with people who are fans of the sport, In some ways, it's not that difficult because I'm a fan of the sport. So what I find curious and interesting, I can, ask myself that question and share it with the audience, and maybe they'll find it interesting. To come up with questions for drivers that they haven't been asked before is somewhat challenging, because at the end of the day, if they've won the race, then of course they're going to be happy. If they've crashed out, then they're going to be sad. If it's car's unreliable or whatever it happens to be. So in the end, I don't try and be anything other than myself, and I'm long since over being sensitive to I won't be everyone's cup of tea. It's nature of life, isn't it? That we warm to some people and we don't warm to others. I come in peace. I have an opinion. It won't necessarily be shared by everybody else, but that's awesome, because that's what having an opinion is. I don't argue about facts. I love facts, because there's no point anyone debating, the facts, because they have earned the right to be called a fact by the data that's presented before us. And I really enjoy being at racetracks and watching motor races, and I have no desire to be a racer anymore. But how awesome it was that I got the chance to do it.
Well, one of the things I was looking at is, it's a pretty hectic schedule. How do you, it's not just that you're going to 24 circuits, but you're doing the same thing every year to make it fresh. And did you ever have any blunders, especially at the beginning, where you're trying to, I don't know, did you ever have to read a prompt, or you were doing something that just didn't work and you're like, oh, geez? Yeah,
look, what I don't have, which professional presenters have, is the ability to read a script and then deliver it word for word. So I imagine that's what actors do. They have a script, and they may play on a certain, a few words here and there, but I suspect a lot of script, the director expects it to be delivered word for word, because that's what's been signed off on. So I don't have that ability. If somebody gives me what I would say in British or in Scottish, the gist of what they want to say, I don't know if you have that expression, then I can then put that in my own words. So I'm not a recall presenter. Can I come up with a question? Can I fill some time? Can I make sure that when the director's giving you a 5-second count because it's live and you need to go to the anthem, can I fill that time? Yes, I've become comfortable with 10 seconds is a long time in television if you have to fill. If you've run out of things to say, but you have to find something for 10 seconds, then that becomes the challenge, and it's a skill, and you want to do it the best you can. So in the same way that I was not the best Formula One driver, I tried my best. I don't assume for one moment that I come in any category of being the best in television, but I try my best, and I enjoy it, and I enjoy being part of a team that share our thoughts and tell a story about what's happening.
Well, let's look at your career in F1, because it got off to quite a start, because you came in to replace Ayrton Senna, right? Is that correct? At Williams, what was that like for you as a young driver and this legend of a person? And it's a tragic moment in sport. And how do you get into that?
Yeah, well, I was testing I progressed through. I mentioned earlier I did my first year in cars in Formula 4, then I went to Paul Stewart Racing, so Jackie Stewart's son's team, so I did 3 years with various formulas there. And in my second year in Formula 3, I got the call up to do some testing for Williams. So Sir Frank Williams gave me that opportunity, and it was basic stuff, like aero runs on an airfield and things like that.
What does that mean? So if people don't know what these test drives are, what are they?
Well, back in those days, Formula One teams had entire test crews. Nowadays, testing's restricted, so you don't have it. But you would go sometimes to an airfield, and it would be as simple as just doing straight line runs to validate the aerodynamic load of the wing package. Sometimes it would be on track testing new tyres or testing new gearboxes or testing new parts, because the race drivers didn't have the time to do all that. And then you would sift through, kind of like a crash test dummy, you'd sift through the items, and what showed promise, the team would continue to develop. And then the race driver would try it and see if it made the performance better. And ultimately, you're searching for that. But is a test
driver leading up to becoming a member of the team?
Yeah.
Always, okay.
Yeah, that was the way. Nigel Mansell had been a test driver before he became a Grand Prix driver. Damon Hill had been test driver at Williams before he became a race driver. So I tested for Nigel Mansell for a year. I tested for Alain Prost for a year, and then I tested at the beginning of '94 for Ayrton Senna and Damon Hill. Sadly, Ayrton was killed at the San Marino Grand Prix in that May. Monaco, they entered only one car for Damon Hill, and then Barcelona in May was my first race in Formula One. I got promoted from test driver into being the race driver. Impossible to replace Ayrton because he was the greatest. He was, incredible human being and fantastic race driver. But all I could do was take the opportunity, do my best, and that led to 15 years in Formula One.
What is it, just if I can ask you about Ayrton Senna, because last year was the anniversary of his death, and what really makes him the greatest driver and such a legend that even all these decades after his unfortunate timing and passing, what is it that still appeals to people about him?
His look. He was a handsome race driver. His intelligence, when he answered, you could tell there was an intellect there. There was a thought process there. His commitment behind the wheel, his racing ability, his ruthlessness. He was very, he's a very attractive man in not just his physicality, but just his personality and presence. And he understood the power of bringing people together in a team and getting the best out of those team members. People wanted to work more and longer for him because of his commitment in the car. He repaid any work you did, he repaid it by lap time, delivering a lap time. Famously around the streets of Monaco, he won this Grand Prix several times, one of the most challenging races on the calendar. He was on pole position one year by over a second. He spoke about it was like he was out of the car looking down on himself, driving. He was a spiritual man. If I felt I was out of the car looking down on myself, that would have scared the life out of me. I'm not a spiritual man, and I wasn't as good a driver as Ayrton Senna. But whatever it was, whatever it took for him to be the way he was, it was Formula One defining in terms of his ability to be human being and machine in perfect harmony.
Wow. How then do you're not stepping into his shoes or his car or anything like that, but it is a huge position to be a part of a team that he's no longer part of. How did you cope with that? I mean, you were 23 at that time?
Yeah.
That's pretty young.
I was young. I was still pretty shy, but I'd tested for the team for a few years, so I felt at home within the team. They trusted that I could drive a lap time and I could drive the car, and they needed someone that could bring the car home and get points, and while they figured out what the future was going to be. And the future became a full-time drive in 95. So 94, I shared the car with Nigel Mansell. He did 8 races and I did the others. And at the end of that year, they decided to go with me rather than Nigel. Nigel was 40. He'd already won a world championship. It would have cost him more money. The question was, he was living in America. Was he really committed as he was? And, I was the solution at the time. And they went on to win world championships with Damon, Jacques Villeneuve, who his father had raced in Formula One. Jacques lived here in Monaco. He won a world championship with them. It was the sort of Williams era after Ayrton's passing. And then it became the McLaren era. I'd moved there. Then it became the Ferrari era with Michael Schumacher. And, the sport continues on. Here we are celebrating 75 years of Formula One.
Well, you were at the event in London for that. What was that like? I mean, it was pretty spectacular in terms of a lot of stars, a lot of lights and shows, a lot of money spent. What was that really about, that celebration? The
celebration was an opportunity for Liberty, who own Formula One. They've transformed the viewership of the sport. They've grown the sport. There's been an element of, out of the terrible COVID time, it coincided with them taking the decision to give Netflix access.
Right.
All the teams were involved, I think, apart from Ferrari and Mercedes. But Netflix came out, Drive to Survive, COVID's there, people are at home suddenly streaming and looking for content. Formula One got on track quickly as a sport. It found a way to go racing without spectators. And suddenly people fell in love that had previously not been interested in the sport, or we'd maybe been losing audience because it'd been a bit predictable for a while. But all of that came together, And suddenly, there's been a 30% increase in female viewership. Formula One has taken off in America, which is kind of the holy grail for sports and music and movies, if you can break America. So there's been this incredible growth period. And the 75 celebration kick-off party at the O2 was another offering, another moment for fans to engage with Formula One prior to the season starting. And probably quite challenging for all the teams and drivers to be there and to do their thing, because it's another night away from home ahead of a big year of travel. But it's for the greater good, and it drives audience, it drives financial revenue. All of that goes into the sport, and therefore, you got to make hay while the sun shines.
No, sometimes you look at these things and you go, is it really worth the money that they're spending on one night, bringing all these people together for one sort of sports sector in the world? But I don't know if you know this, but the International University of Monaco has the business sports management program, and they have, I think it's 70 students, and almost 100% are women coming from North America who are watching that Drive to Survive on Netflix. Like, they're really engaged in their own way to do that. I've never seen the show.
Yeah. You've never watched it?
I mean, I've written a book on motorsport, and I don't know why. I guess because I kind of missed the boat of it, and now I just hear about it. But what is it? Like, just a reality show of Formula One?
Well, it's an edited version of what happens in Formula One, and I think it's very well received by many people. Like you, not like you. I've watched 2 episodes.
Okay.
I watched episode 1 of season 1 with my younger son, as he was then. He's 16 now, and he didn't really. It didn't capture him at that time, so he wasn't paying attention. So I thought, well, I go to the Grand Prix. Do I really want to sit and watch it all over again? The only other episode I watched was the 2021 season finale, Hamilton, Verstappen, because I was curious to see how they projected that controversy.
How they edited that,
Yeah. And I remember sitting watching it and going, it felt a bit like watching a Bond film. You know that James Bond is going to, kill the baddie, historically kiss the girl, and sail off and the world will be saved. Yeah, exactly. But it doesn't stop you tuning in to watch it if you're a Bond fan, because it's a little escape from reality. So I would say that Netflix is a little escape from the reality of Formula One, because nothing is that entertaining all the time, watching people just doing normal things. But of course they capture the right moments, they edit it in an entertaining way, and it creates entertainment, and that's why it's so popular.
Do you ever watch any of your old footage or interviews? I mean, you had some good rivalries going, did you not?
I did this morning, actually. There's a gentleman who works with Formula One, does all of the FIA press conference interviews, Tom Clarkson. He has, using the Formula One archive, come up with a concept called Memory Box. So this morning, over at the Columbus Hotel, I was sitting filming with them, watching footage of me being the test driver for Williams when Ayrton came and joined
just
the
before
team.
This,
yeah,
amazing.
Absolutely. This morning, my first race, various events during my career, and it was a wonderful walk down memory lane for me. I'm not sure how entertaining it would be for others to watch me on that particular journey, but I loved it.
But may I ask, are they filming you watching them?
Yes.
So they're seeing your reactions and capturing your eyes and the little maybe tear that's in your eye from a memory?
All of that, because some of the moments I don't remember. They showed the press conference where Frank Williams announced that I'd be driving the car in Barcelona, and I'm seeing myself answer questions, and I was just a child, I was just a young man. I don't remember being asked those questions.
Wow.
I don't remember answering in the way I did. A lot of the images do take me back, and it's opened up a memory, a memory space where I go, oh yeah, I do remember that. But some of it feels like it was someone else's life, because the pace of life, and I guess it all depends on the individual. Some people have amazing recall, and I guess coming back to what I said earlier about I'm not able to read a script and then memorize it and deliver it word for word. That's not how my mind works. Some people can. So therefore, the way my mind is, I remember key things from my career. I just don't remember it all. And it's actually, even I've got buddies from school who will go, oh, remember when we went to this party or we did this? And I'll be like, no, I don't. But they have that amazing recall.
So let's look at some of the guys that you were racing against, because, I mean, even Mika Häkkinen, you were with him at McLaren, and now he's also a Monaco resident, and you guys are on Viaplay together?
Correct.
I mean, you guys were teammates. How was your relationship then, and what is your relationship like now?
We always had a good relationship, but it's a much better relationship now because we're older, we're wiser, we're not competing against each other. You know, I love Mika. Mika is he's got a big heart. Mm-hmm. He's a very straightforward individual. What you see is what you get. He's not bitter, twisted, you know, screwed up in any way. You know, he was a generational driver, brilliant talent, and he's a big family man, you know, and as you say, he lives in Monaco. We do events together, we do filming together. We always laugh. You know, I tend to do more of the talking, but he'll drop these wonderful one-liners that, you know, just crack me up.
Yeah.
But yeah, what a great driver. And it was, you know, of course, we fell out on several occasions as teammates because my purpose was not to bow down to Mika, and his purpose was not to make me happy. Our purpose was to try and beat each other. So the whole name teammates is a misnomer. He's not your mate. He's your first rival.
That's interesting.
You know, his success is your failure, and vice versa. And it's actually one of the, I find, fascinating aspects of team management. You know, the team principle. How do you employ the two best drivers you can, knowing that only one of them can win that particular race? So it takes a bit of management and a bit of skill, but in the end, it teaches you a lot about life. And I think that's one of the things I take away from my journey as a ex-Formula One driver. What an education. What a university of life to have travelled the world, to have gone on the psychology of that emotional roller coaster of watching somebody drive the same car, have success, and not be jealous. Try and understand, how do you dissect that? How do you analyse how they've achieved that success? And how do you then use that data and use that information to improve your own performance? It's wonderful because you're on, you know, I've seen Mika in tears of absolute frustration, and I've seen him in tears of joy, and he's seen me in the same way. You know, you don't tend to see colleagues go through that range of emotion in normal life. Mm-hmm. You would hope that people wouldn't be in tears of frustration. I would like to imagine that in any business people have, you know, the tears of joy of success. But everyday life, with the greatest respect, isn't the emotional roller coaster of being in sport. Mm-hmm. Sport is popular around the world because it is a break away from everyday life, and it is an emotional roller coaster. And
it's elite.
It's
to get there.
It's the football. It's the best players in the world, and if you're a fan of a particular team, if they're going through a drought, you don't drop the team. You stay with them because that's your team, and then you suffer with them when they're not winning, and then when they do win, you have the elation of that success. So I remember being here for the very first Laureate Sports Awards when Nelson Mandela stood up, and I can't remember word for word because I've already explained I don't have that, but he said something along the lines of, you know, sport has the power to change the world. It has the ability to bring people together and communicate with the youth in a way that politicians and leaders can't. And I remember thinking, wow, that is just amazing, because it's true. Sport brings people together, and it's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, that's an amazing observation to use that word teammate, because so much of what, especially when you look at Formula One and the way that the media projects teams and teammates, and they are competing against each other. And I find it really fascinating to watch young drivers and their frustration, and as they age, how they kind of mature and cope with what frustration really means and having to listen. I think it goes more from me, the driver, to we, the team.
Yeah, I think that's a correct observation, and that's why it was kind of interesting this morning to be doing that memory box filming, because I was seeing myself being interviewed in my 20s, and there were some parts I'm going, that was good. I didn't give too much away, but there was also just a youthful, you know, sincerity that, you know, as you get older, you get a bit more battle weary. You don't have the same enthusiasm for answering the same question. Yeah. Especially when things are not going well. You get a little bit of entitlement when you've been around for a few years. You know, you're earning money. That gives you position to make decisions that you wouldn't have had when you were younger. Mm-hmm. And that can go two ways. It can, you can be used to enhance your performance, But we've all seen people when they start earning a few quid, they get a bit demanding and they get a bit rude, and it's a bit like, I want this because I can have this, and I need this, so just bring it to me and do it now. You know, you get some people who become, you know, assholes with success.
But that's not you. You kept yourself grounded?
Oh,
People kept you grounded?
I think I've always been a man of the people.
I thought you were going to say I've always been an asshole.
Always been an asshole. No. Yeah, of course, I had the growth in my life and got a little bit spoiled at a certain point, which, you know, part of the reason why I ended up in a plane crash was, you know, I woke up.
Sorry?
I was in a plane crash in 2000, the Tuesday before the Barcelona Grand Prix. I was in London and I woke up early. And I called my office and said, you know, can I bring the private flight earlier? I was flying out of Farnborough to come back to Nice. And the aircraft that I normally used wasn't available to fly earlier. So I was like, well, get me another, you know, not maybe quite as rude as that, but just
kind of like that, yeah.
Kind of like that to emphasize. So they found me another aircraft. I turned up at Farnborough, said hi to the pilots. And an hour later, we had an engine failure, had to land at Lyon. Sadly, there was some, you know, piloting errors which led to the aircraft crashing and both pilots being killed. And, you know, I was on board with my fiancée at the time, my trainer. We climbed out the front of the aircraft. I had some broken ribs because of the seatbelt. And I got back to Monaco late Tuesday night by road. I didn't want to fly back from Lyon. And then on Thursday, flew to Barcelona and raced in the Grand Prix.
What?
And finished second, yeah.
No.
So, you know, that was a little bit of... I had no need to take another aircraft. I could have flew back in the afternoon, but I wanted to. And it was... And, yeah, I had the ability to make the choice to do it earlier. But that was a life-changing moment. Not only was it... could have been the end of my life and, you know, the realization of how close I came to death. But it also was, just don't be an asshole. Just be patient. Just don't, you know, if you've planned something, just stick with the plans. It doesn't mean you can't change things. Of course, you know, that's part of life, you know.
But, I mean, is that something that happens and immediately you're like, oh, I've learned my lesson? Like, that wasn't, I mean, how you can mentally guard that, keep that in yourself, and then go and race, because you also have to have that mental capacity to race, and physical, but...
That evening, I lay in bed in the same apartment that I've lived in my, you know, whole life in Monaco, and I had that little shiver. You know, sometimes your body has a little shiver, and, you know, the expression would be sometimes, oh, someone's walked over your grave. And I lay there and I went, jeez, I could have died today. What was I thinking? Why? You know, it was a conversation with myself. It was the kind of, you know, I guess when you're, you know, a teenager and you've got to ground them to make them realize how lucky they are. That was kind of that moment. And as an adult, it was a life-defining moment of which I started making better decisions.
Because you also are driving in a sport where you could die if you don't have control of your car.
Yeah, but, you know, the closest I came to dying was in an aircraft.
But you never had fears with the car. You never had any...
No, I of course, you drive in certain conditions where you feel uncomfortable. If you're driving in the rain and you can't see where you're going and the car's aquaplaning, you're trying to make a decision, do I stay flat, do I lift? But that's not, I wouldn't call it fear. I don't like the feeling of fear. You know, I don't like being scared. I like...
When are you scared? When do you feel that?
I'm scared of the dark. I don't particularly want to be walking down a dark alley somewhere. Our family home was at the end of the village in Scotland, and the street lights didn't go to the family home. You know, it's dark at 4 o'clock there in the winter, and it used to scare me, and I used to have, you know, nightmares about coming back from boys' club or Cub Scouts or something, and I'd have to sprint home the last bit in the dark, up through the trees, get to the front door, and I was always scared someone was, you know, hand on my shoulder. So they were my silly little fears. But in a race car, no, it felt more like it's a science project. There's a certain amount of load that the wings will generate in terms of downforce. There's a certain amount of mechanical grip that will be generated through the compound of the tyre, and you go and take that to its physical limit of what the tarmac will give you. And I loved that science project of driving a Grand Prix car on the limit.
And you fly okay? Like, you don't have fear of flying?
I'm a fatalist. So what's meant to be is meant to be. It wasn't meant that day for my time to be up. Sadly for the pilots, it was. They were two young men. They were married. They had children. And their life ended, and that's terrible, and it's tragic. And
did you have to cope with that yourself? Did you feel a responsibility? It wasn't your fault, but did you, as a young person, feel responsible?
I did. I only met them when I got on the aircraft, so I hadn't built any connection with them. If it was the regular pilots, then I know that would have been more difficult, because when you lose people close to you, it's personal.
Yeah.
When every day there's people losing their lives, and it's our news.
Yeah.
But when it's someone close, then that becomes something that they've influenced your life, they've enhanced your life, and therefore if they lose their life, you've lost something. So there's all of the emotions that you attach to that. But in the case of that particular plane crash, I hadn't built a relationship with them. I felt terribly sorry for their wives, for their children, for their parents, because that's just such a horrible,
there's no preparation for that.
Yeah, exactly. So, with Eddie Jordan, it moved very quickly in the end, but we had time all of us had time to realize that he was dealing with chemotherapy, he was dealing with the cancer, he was dealing with the treatment, and that in all likelihood, it was, the cancer was going to win.
Well, let's talk about something a little more fun. How about Red Bull?
Yeah.
So when I actually started doing some reporting for People magazine for Formula One in Monaco, it was 2005 and 2006 with the Red Bull team, which you were then a part of, and that was the beginning days for them. And they brought Hollywood to Monaco. The first year we did Star Wars, the World Party at the Grimaldi Forum, and then they had the paddock. And then the second year, I think, was Superman. I mean, what was your take on joining that new team at the time? It was quite flamboyant, and there was a lot going on. Did you like how they were making it big and splashy? And you brought a lot of experience to the team. What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, it was the right time in my career to join what was Jaguar. So Red Bull bought the Jaguar Formula One team for $1, took over all the liabilities, and Mr. Marishit's a tremendous visionary, created the energy drink sector ultimately. Red Bull was there's now so many different energy drinks, but he always used sport as a way to connect with the younger generation, and he saw the opportunity. He'd been a sponsor of Sauber, he'd been involved in Formula One, he loved the sport, and he created an opportunity for myself, for Christian Horner as a first-time team principal, to put our fingerprint on the team and to build the team towards being a successful team. That was his vision. He said, first we get the respect of the paddock, and then we focus on winning the World Championship, which seemed lofty vision, but he created a drinks sector against all odds, against all of the big brands. So he wasn't shy of a challenge. And he understood that Formula One is about people. If it was about the name above the door, Ferrari would win everything. They're the biggest name in the sport. Formula One is about people. If you bring together the right group of people, empower them with the tools for them to do their job, it's only logical that success will come. And I totally believed that, and I totally bought into it. And it was a wonderful end to my career to be part of that journey. And I didn't mind the Superman capes, and
fun.
We had Pink at the first race singing, let's get the party started and all that. I was in my 30s. I was, financially independent. Red Bull was a massive step down in terms of income and what have you. But I had unfinished business, and it wasn't about the money. It was about the journey, and I just took it all on, and no issue. I asked Prince Albert if I could put the cape on
that
for
was
the podium.
2006, right? That you won the podium in Monaco?
Yeah, and he said yes. And I know there were some journalists, because I was asked in the press conference, they said, it was disrespectful putting a Superman cape on, and one of the journalists said I looked like a tit.
Oh my gosh.
He obviously wasn't a big fan of it, but I was like, well, look, if some young kids out there connect Formula One drivers with Superman, I think that's cool. I've got no problem with that. And also, I didn't do it disrespectfully against the sport. And I asked, as I say, I asked Monsignor if he was okay with it, and he was absolutely fine. So.
And then you jumped in the pool, or Christian Horner jumped in the pool?
Christian Horner, because we had that sort of silly little bet, I guess, where can't quite understand why Christian would bet against us being on the podium. But the thing was, if we got a podium, he'd jump in the pool naked, which would suggest that he, wouldn't have expected us to get a podium. But I'd won here a couple of times. I'd always been good around the streets. And circumstance and unreliability for others meant that we made it through, and he jumped in the pool, not quite naked.
No, I don't remember it being naked.
Yeah, he wrapped himself in the cape. But it was just part of Red Bull doing things differently. And I think that they genuinely, in the last 20 years, have moved the dial and the openness of Formula One. They're serious in the same way that any of the top teams, all of the Formula One teams, professional people, not all of them get the chance to win, of course. But I think that Red Bull have done it their way, and well done them.
How do you see the sport? How has it evolved? I mean, you've been in this game for over 20 years. I mean, in terms of the technological advances for the drivers, all of the simulating driving that they're doing, and also so much data analysis. Is it the same sport that you were in 20 years ago?
On Sunday, when the lights go out until the checker flag, it's the same sport. It's human beings trying to exploit the potential from their vehicle better than others. And there will be a winner at the end of the race. Of course, what has changed is in this modern health and safety world, there's been an even bigger focus on crash structures. There's been an element of the sport trying to remain road relevant, which was a big play back in the day for having manufacturers involved. Mm-hmm. I think that's become less important, whether it's a Mercedes or a Ferrari or whatever. As long as it's an engine, it could be anything, quite frankly, because the sport is strong enough. I don't think it particularly needs the brands, the automotive brands, to make the sport compelling. What it needs to be compelling is it has to be the fastest form of closed-circuit racing in the world, and that's what Formula One is. I think we're entering an era where it might be a little bit tricky for a few years with the engines are going to be 50% electrical, 50% internal combustion. That will have its own unique challenges, which will change the way the races play out in some ways. But as long as, and I don't think that even myself as a fan, and I think the majority of fans, they don't really mind what's under the cover. They just want to see great racing, and they want to see great drivers go wheel to wheel, and we want to be impressed. We want to see someone do something where we go, wow, how did they do that? That's what elite sports people do. Mm-hmm. So the sport has changed a lot in terms of the technology, but the essence of what we're doing is still the same. The gladiators get in the car and go and battle.
What is it about the Monaco Grand Prix, though? Because, there was some rumor mill going around that they'd take the Formula One Monaco Grand Prix out of the calendar. Now they've signed on with Liberty until 2031. Can you ever imagine Monaco not being a part of the Formula One calendar?
I don't want to imagine Monaco not being part of the calendar. I think there was an inevitable standoff, a negotiation. Monaco had an enhanced position for many, many years. It had different rights to other circuits because it was unique. It was the Grand Prix, the Royal Grand Prix. It was the Grand Prix that the stars wanted to come to, that the partners and sponsors wanted to be on the back of yachts. It was something different. But of course, the world has evolved, and the Grand Prix has had to evolve with that as well. So it's a lot more aligned with all of the other Grand Prix who have to earn their right to be on the calendar. We saw during COVID there was no Grand Prix in Monaco, and Formula One continued to grow. Mm-hmm. So I think that was a realization for the local promoter not to believe what maybe they'd previously said, which is, Formula One needs Monaco. Well, Formula One continued to grow without Monaco. I personally believe that Monaco is a fantastic part of the Grand Prix calendar. It's the race that, with the same amount of points as any other race, the drivers would want to win, because we identify this race with the greats of the sport. Senna winning multiple times here, or Graham Hill, or if you look through the 75 years of Formula One, there is a rich history of names that are famous around the world that have competed on the streets of Monaco and have won here. And as drivers, we want to be associated with those legends because they're part of our childhood, and it gives us a pride and and it gives us a place within the history of the sport. So thankfully, the standoff resulted in a multi-year contract being signed. And, you know, Prince Albert is a huge sports fan. He's a former Olympian, as you know, multiple Olympics with bobsleigh, and very knowledgeable and passionate about a number of different sports. And I've often felt that we should be celebrating just how many sports stars choose Monaco for their base, for their life, because it's totally unique in the world, and we're afforded, you know, a safety and a anonymity within Monaco that you wouldn't get in other places, and we should all feel a kind of, you know, a band of, I was going to say band of brothers, but in the interest
and
of
sisters.
Not being sexist, yeah, brothers and sisters, indeed.
Well, I'm going to lead into that with the more than equal, but I just wanted to say I was talking to Prince Albert recently, and he told me that he's actually, growing up, he did 17 different sports. And I mean, I kind of questioned that, like, oh, you tried it once. He was like, no, I was really involved in all kinds of sports. And that really, to me, reflects the way he is in this country and why it attracts so many elite athletes. But sisterhood, more than equal, this is the initiative you launched last year in 2024. Can you tell listeners, what is this?
So, as I mentioned earlier in this discussion, I had a younger sister. Sadly, she passed away, you know, almost a decade ago now.
I'm sorry.
But Lindsay was 6 years younger. So when she started racing karts at 8, I was already, you know, champion in karting and well on the sort of route towards, it would be, the next step would be moving into cars. When I moved into cars at 17, she's 11, so she's still, you know, a young girl. And I get signed up by Jackie Stewart. I leave home, I move down south, and then I'm on this sort of roller coaster of success that drives me towards Formula One. And inevitably, the whole family are getting super excited about this, including my sister, that, you know, maybe I could become a professional race driver. Maybe I could be a Grand Prix driver. And it just meant basically she didn't get the same level of support and commitment that I got through those really important years, you know, the teenage years. And eventually she stopped racing. She, I believe, was more naturally talented than I was. And had she been given the same level of support, I can't say she would have been a Grand Prix driver, because who knows? I didn't know I was going to be a Grand Prix driver, but I believe she could have moved the dial and become a professional racer in some form if that's what she chose to do. So when she was alive, she'd come to so many of my races, and I would often sort of go, Lindsay, you know, you didn't quite get the opportunity. And she was like, you know, in Scotland we call each other son, even if clearly I wasn't her son. But she was like, son, it's fine, you know. I love racing, I love seeing you do well. And anyway, when she passed, it became even more focused in my mind that I didn't want any other young girls to miss out on their opportunity, because the older brother got the focus. You know, a little bit of guilt, a little bit of whatever, but it was enough to stimulate me to do something. And that led to the formation of W Series, which has morphed into F1 Academy, which is the all-female single-seater championship, which runs on the undercard to Formula One. And it creates a platform for all of the talented women that are available to enter that championship to stand out, win races, and create opportunity for the future career. Like the boys in Formula 3, Formula 2, whatever, not all of them will realise their dreams, because life isn't like that. You know, there might be one in the coming years that will be good enough to race in Formula One. I believe they are good enough. When I say they, I believe that women have the ability to compete equally with men. I believe there will be a woman in Formula One that isn't a tokenism. It's a real talent and can therefore win Grand Prix. I don't know when it will happen, but I know if we didn't do something to accelerate change, it would have taken a lot longer. So my efforts to then roll into More Than Equal, which is about using data, using science, engaging with HINSA Performance, who are the leading sports medical science facility. They trained many of the drivers in Formula One. They've got all of the data, so they know physically there's no reason that women don't have the strength. And, you know, from a cognitive point of view, there's absolutely, you know, there's no intelligence tests that would be failed by any women to show that they have the hand-eye coordination to compete at the highest level. So we will continue to support, identify, guide, and at some point in my lifetime we will find the one, and it may be more than one. But it might be like buses. You stand there, there's no bus, and then a whole bunch come at the same time.
Well, it's funny. I mean, Susie Wolf is also a Monaco resident who is running the Formula One Academy, and there's some of the Formula One Academy team members here. And I think that Susie has somehow become the face of gender parity in motorsport, and she's supposed to overnight solve this problem, and we're supposed to overnight have a woman driving in Formula One. And, I don't know, I guess really, is there progress being made? Not just in this last year, because I think in the last year there's been 4 or 5 accelerated programs that are putting money behind it. So those sponsorship opportunities, especially Iron Dames. But do you see progress?
I guess ultimately progress will
be... Not just in drivers, sorry to interrupt you, but just overall. Do you see progress in gender parity in motorsport?
Yeah, 100%.
Really?
Yeah, totally. We've now got female race engineers and things that we didn't have in the past. They've always been part of the teams. This is the thing where actually when some people are a little bit, any of the cliche jokes about women can't drive at the same level and all this sort of thing, I just don't think within the sport we've ever had that feeling. There just hasn't been enough talents coming through. Mm-hmm. There's thousands of young boys go into karting, and there might be one
exactly
that's that generational talent. So we need thousands of young girls. So you need to create the platform, make them realize that there is a place for them, and let the families know as well. We cliche so many things. You if you have a son and a daughter, you will probably buy slightly different toys for them. Why do we do that? Because that's what we've historically been shown to do, or that's what kind of society feels like it should do. But in the same way that my sister had a motorbike, I had a motorbike, my brother had a motorbike, we all were given karts. We were just all given the same opportunity. So the fact that she was female and I was male didn't, in my parents' eyes, change anything about what was presented to us, and that's why she started racing, and she was very good.
But does it? You said on the website it matters that we have a woman in Formula One. Does it matter? I mean, can we not just continue like this? If women try but they don't actually have the talent and don't reach that level, does it matter?
I'm thoughtful for a moment on it because I'm trying to think, did I say it matters?
Having a woman as an F1 world champion really matters. That's what it says on the website. And I was looking at it going, why does it really matter?
Yeah, well, that is a very good question of which I can't actually answer right now, because it doesn't... Having a woman at the front line of anything, it's about having the right person, I think, at the front line of anything. So maybe that quote is slightly misleading. Do I think it's possible? Absolutely. Do I think it will happen? Yes. Can you manufacture a miracle? Well, why should we? It's a line from a Robbie Williams song. You can't manufacture a miracle. It's about giving the opportunity.
Yeah.
I want to play my part in accelerating opportunity for women, because I've had the personal experience where I've seen opportunity be cut short, and no one is going to make it in this industry without support.
Yeah.
So let's support everyone equally, and then talent will talk. And right now, probably there isn't someone that's about to go toe to toe with Max Verstappen, because that's what we're looking for.
Yeah. So,
I couldn't go toe to toe with Max Verstappen.
But there was a quote I read. I mean, I love life, but I'm not sure I ever loved being a race car driver. Did you say that? I read that in Sports Illustrated.
Yeah.
What the heck? I
know, because you would imagine that racing was the love of my life. The love of my life is life. I love life, and of course, I've got a 16-year-old son who Dayton. Yeah, he's at ISM. He's going to start racing this year. As anyone who's a parent knows, when you have a child, your heart just gets that bit bigger, and you would do anything for your kids to want them to live a full life and to be healthy and happy and all those good things. But I think I'm just such a sort of village boy fatalist that I I see my brother, he never raced anything. He is one of the most content, happy, loving, kind, fun people I know. And you don't have to be a Formula One driver to have a great life. You know, you don't have to do anything in the public eye to have a sense of achievement. You just have to be of a mindset that whatever it is you're doing to the best of your ability. So had I not been a Formula One driver, would I have felt I'd failed in life? No, I would have worked in the family business. I'd be living back in Scotland. The transport company continues to grow and deliver an income to say, my brother and his grown-up kids. And
you'd be part of that.
I'd be part of that.
Still walking down the family laneway, worrying somebody's going to grab you in the dark.
Yeah, but it just wasn't. Yeah, absolutely. I'm getting scared of the dark. But it just wasn't meant to be my journey. Fate decided this was my journey.
And Dayton, does he have more of an actual vision? Does he want to win? Does he want that championship title? Like, is that where he's at? Because it must be hard for you to also know the risks involved in what he's undertaking.
Yeah, it feels like he's got more of a vision of that he wants to be a Grand Prix driver. Will he? It's in his hands. All I can do is create the opportunity, you know, and fate and talent and hard work and all the good things will decide. But I think they have much more of an awareness now in modern society that you can become a professional sports person and it will lead to fame and fortune. Mm-hmm. I think growing up, you know, born in the 70s, growing up in the 80s, it was still international sport as we know it was still evolving, and it hadn't been supercharged. You know, footballers of the 80s were revered, but they weren't earning, you know, 500 grand a week or whatever the big guys are earning nowadays. You know, everything's become so supercharged now. You know, American sports, the contracts that get signed are just stratospheric, but they are a reflection of where the sport sits and the revenues it has, and therefore the sports stars become, you know, multi-millionaires very quickly in their careers.
I'm always curious with people and athletes like yourself. Do you get approached a lot about investments? Like, you own a pub and you own an entertainment company and you invest. Like, do you get approached a lot about these things?
Not as much as maybe you would imagine. I
can hit you up for something after the show.
You absolutely can. And I will, like any of the opportunities that come, I take a look and then decide, does it capture my attention? Because there's always a risk versus reward in these things. And I've been involved in a number of businesses that haven't been successful, but I went into them with belief and passion and commitment, and the world just didn't feel that and see that in the same way. So you have to respect it.
The Columbus Hotel, here's a good one.
Yeah, the Columbus was actually
in Monte Carlo.
Yeah, it was an education for me, in that it turned out that the right business opportunity with the wrong partner. And my Scottish partner in that business was a gentleman called Ken McCulloch, who's recently passed away. But he was not a good business partner. And he left the principality, and I acquired his shares because he'd lied. And he's not here to defend himself, so you're going to have to take my word for it. But why would he give me his shares and leave the principality?
Why does anybody leave the principality? There's only one reason.
Yeah, out of kindness. His way of counting was 2 for him, 1 for me. And I put trust, like in any team, you've got to trust. Yeah, I've got to trust my mechanics. I've got to trust. They've got to trust in me. And that was a partnership that did not fulfill the trust that I put in place. But it was a great experience for me. And the flip side of that was coming out of, I was 10 years a shareholder in Columbus. And Ian Livingston, the Livingston brothers, they have the Fairmont. Ian came along when I needed a partner, I needed support, I needed someone that understood the industry, and he could have taken advantage, but he was an honourable businessman who acquired my shares in an honourable way and has always treated me with a respect of which, I would do anything that he asked, and within reason, to show my respect for the way he dealt with that. And he's recently sold the Columbus on to new owners. Yeah, and that journey continues. But the business experience I've had in life has been wonderful, because some of it's been painful, some of it's been just joy and happiness and return. But it's all part of life's journey, of which I've loved. What a university of life I've been afforded.
So you mentioned that you moved here in 1995, and for a host of reasons, and you love calling the Principality home. What is it that people don't get about why all these athletes, why so many people love living here? It's not just, it's not about taxes and security. There is something quite unique about living here.
Taxes is one thing in a British society that those that are predisposed to being negative on tax just immediately hunt in. I remember years ago, I won't say the name, but a well-known TV presenter in the UK who was married to a well-known Hollywood actor, but he happened to be Scottish. I remember sitting with that individual at a dinner at Goodwood, which is a great motorsports event. And she asked where I lived, and I said Monaco, and she went, "Oh, you're one of those tax dodging fuckers." Excuse my language, but that was the quote. And I went, "Okay, well, it's interesting you say that, because I pay tax on my income in the UK." And so I called her out. I said, "How much tax do you pay?" And she went, "That's private, I'm not going to tell you." I said, "Well, hold on, you just called me a tax dodging bastard. I pay tax in the UK," and at that time, I can't remember what the figure was, but it was six figures, more than the average income. So I was contributing to society, but not living there. And I was happily paying the tax on the income that I had in the UK on British Grand Prix and other events. And it took her back, because she just didn't understand that just because you choose to live somewhere else, it doesn't mean you've given up on your responsibilities. Of course, I don't pay global income tax in the UK because I don't live there anymore. And I was like, well, if I emigrated to Australia, would you be quite so offended that I wasn't paying as much tax in the UK because I'm now paying it in Australia? So there is a band of people, uneducated, who jump to that one. And I continue today to pay tax in the UK on my income there. But of course, I have globally paid less tax than I would have done because of the structure in Monaco. But I could have moved to Switzerland. I could have moved to Channel Islands. I could have gone to Isle of Man. I can see the Isle of Man from where I grew up in the southwest of Scotland. Wow. But I chose Monaco. The everything, the weather, the security, the opportunity for training, the logistics to travel around Europe, the like-minded can-do attitude. There's not this sort of tall poppy syndrome where people want to cut you down here. There's a real entrepreneurial spirit, which I think is great to be part of. Our Prince, I'm proud to know Prince Albert and to have spent time with him, because I just find him, a very grounded, sincere, kind individual who is a man of the people. Anyone who's here in Monaco knows if he's here, he engages with people. He's not
everyone
he's not slightly detached and slightly aloof. So there's so many reasons why I feel good about having spent the majority of my life in Monaco.
Yeah, but not many people have taken a helicopter ride with Prince Albert and Princess Charlene.
Yeah, absolutely. We did some amazing filming through the Formula One show. And, I've been able to drive around the streets here with him in my old Mercedes, it's the same age as me. They've got this Pagoda 1971 Merc. And, I'm proud to have done the podcast with Eddie and Prince Albert as well, because, again, it gives insight. Through my production company, Whisper, we did the Inside Monaco TV show, which was warts and all. So it meant that there was an element of those that don't like Monaco had to have a voice. And that's uncomfortable, but that's in an open and free society. You've got to give people their voice. Yeah. Just because it's not everyone's cup of tea is fine. Not everyone wants to live in New York or London or whatever. We make our choices if you have a free choice and you live your life. But this has been one of the best decisions of my life to be here.
With the Grand Prix in Monaco coming up in May, what do you still get really excited about? What is it that people, not just watching the race, but what is it that's something like an insider thing for you that you just love?
I go back in the cockpit. It's a crazy challenge to drive a Grand Prix car around the streets of Monaco. But I did it with the knowledge of those that I'd followed, the people I looked up to, the people that names drew me into the sport, and the sense of satisfaction when you complete the Grand Prix, not having crashed, because it's very easy to crash here, is immense. And I'm so proud to have won this Grand Prix twice and been on the podium another couple of times. Because irrespective of what anyone thinks of me as an individual, and I'm not looking for any sort of adulation in that respect, but just as a self-worth achievement, to have driven the streets, to have achieved and to have won here it just makes me feel complete as a Grand Prix driver, because it's such a challenge.
Just to round things off a little here, I know our time is up for today, and feel free to come back anytime. It's fascinating. David, you wrote your autobiography, I think in 2007. It Is As It Is. If you look back on that guy, are you still the same guy?
I occasionally flick through the pages of the book, because it was conceived during my last year in Formula One, or the year before my last year in Formula One. So, of course, you're still very much a driver, and you haven't stepped away into normal life, let's call it that. So much is done for you as a sports person. You're supported with so many things. I live what I consider a normal life now. I don't
Really.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. But so of course there would be a different maturity if I was rewriting now. But those were my thoughts, my feelings, my hopes, my desires, the things that drove me, and the sort of life mantras that in many ways still push me forward today. I don't have the intensity of life or the drive. I think I would say I'm a nicer person today, because everything revolved around racing back then. My last thought when I went to sleep, my first thought when I woke up, anything that got in the way of my racing, I would just cut out of my life. So I could be quite ruthless in that respect. But that's what I needed to function at that level at that time. I walked here earlier today with my fiancée and met you outside. I was just feeling so good about life today. I feel so lucky. I don't want to do a sort of a blessed type thing, but I'm just feeling in a really good place in my life. I'm seeing it pass by. I'm 54 now. Unlikely that I'm going to live until I'm 108. So and I don't aspire to that anyway. But I'm just feeling really good about where life has brought me, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to chat with you about it.
Well, what I just want to add, which I thought was quite funny, is it was your friend Eddie Jordan who broke the news of your engagement in January to the press. So, well done, Eddie.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought it was really sweet because your fiancée had said that you are a very traditional person and asked her father's hand in marriage, and I thought there has to be something quite grounding about you then, because it's obviously important to you, family, and greatly appreciate your time on the Monaco Info podcast in English, David. Wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.